Well, folks, when was the last time we could really celebrate an overachieving Penguins team? A good question. I think it goes back to the 2010-11 season when Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin were both out due to injuries, much like they are right now. This is Pittsburgh Postgame on Pittsburgh Sports Live. I'm Matt Gajtka, your host for the first time this season. What a day to make my season debut. The Penguins suffer their first regulation loss of 2021-22. But like I said at the top, I'm here to celebrate tonight, even despite the result, a near mirror image, in fact, if you looked at the flow of the game and the way the goals were scored compared to the opening night game at Tampa 2 weeks ago, in which the Penguins had multiple empty net goals. This time the Lightning get a couple of empty netters. Jason Zucker breaks the shutout of Andrei Vasilevsky late with a power play goal. So no blanking for the Bolts in Pittsburgh. Andrei Vasilevsky still looking for his first career shutout against Pittsburgh. Of course, it all doesn't matter. For the first time this year, the Penguins don't pick up a standings points. They're now 3-1-2 through 6 games and still with 4 games left to go on this exceedingly long but welcomed 8-game homestand to start the season. Who scheduled that one? Was that after the Crosby surgery? Kidding, of course. Thank you for joining me on Pittsburgh Postgame. If you look to the side of your screen on your device right here on the YouTube channel on Pittsburgh Sports Live, you can join me on the live chat. I'm taking your comments, taking your questions. Whatever you may have to say, not about this game necessarily, although, of course, we're going to break it down a little bit, but the opening 6 games of the season overall, as the Penguins have survived and, in fact, thrived without their 2 big boys down the middle, with a guy like Evan Rodriguez playing a ton of minutes, Chris Letang out of the lineup, Brian Rust still recovering from injury, and the Penguins have done what has infuriated teams around the NHL over the past several seasons, and that is not just get by when one of their big guns are out, but actually move up the standings and do better than most teams, and do better than certainly most of us would have expected them to do at this point of the season. And I'm certainly one of those folks who has had to eat some crow here early on. I thought it'd be more about hanging on for the Penguins, but certainly hasn't been the case so far, despite this 5-1 loss to the 2-time defending Stanley Cup champion Tampa Bay Lightning in front of a pretty sparse crowd at PPG Paints. I thought maybe the other night would have been an anomaly against a Western Conference team, but pandemic effect, the lack of Sid and Gino, early season ennui, perhaps. People still not into hockey mode. I'm not sure what it is, but the sellout streak is not just gone. It's dead and buried after tonight's crowd. I'm eager to see what the attendance is. Not to shame anybody out there, but it was quite the jarring sight to see some of those photos from PPG Paints Arena tonight. Couldn't really tell on the broadcast. Not sure if they cranked up the natural sound or what on AT&T Sports Network. But you looked at some of the visuals and wow, wide swaths of empty seats. The kind of thing we haven't really seen at all, in fact, at the new building. New building, it's what, 11 years old now. Hard to believe. So this could have been the last game for the Penguins without at least Sidney Crosby. He's been practicing lately. I think he participated in back-to-back practices earlier this week, Monday and Tuesday, leading up to Sunday and Monday, leading up to tonight's game. So that's promising. The broadcast, AT&T, showed Troy Crosby, Sid's dad, in the stands, in the building. So that gives me a pretty good idea he might play Thursday against Calgary. So if that's the case, we can perhaps close the chapter on this early portion of the season and celebrate some guys, celebrate overall the team performance. I think it was very fitting that Mike Sullivan became the winningest coach in Penguins history during this stretch, because he's kept this team on the straight and narrow. They have played a disciplined brand of hockey. Really, the table was set for that opening night in Tampa Bay, where they didn't give the Lightning anything. And the Lightning really laid an egg, of course, as they admitted later that night after the game. And I know John Cooper, Steven Stamkos et al., they were pretty pissed off at how they played that night. And I was afraid for this one, just in terms of the result, because the Sabres pummeled the Lightning by the same 5-1 score last night. I suppose it was a larger spread than indicated by the flow of the game last night. But still, the Sabres are the Sabres, even in the face of their hot start this year. And the Lightning are the Lightning. They have a lot of pride. And well, we saw early in this game, they were looking for any reason to fight back, literally, in some cases. Sam Lafferty ticked him off with taking a run at Ryan McDonough. McDonough fought him, and then Corey Perry fought him on back-to-back shifts for the Penguins' fourth liner, who's probably never felt that kind of attention at the NHL level. But neither here nor there. The Lightning were due to break out, you could say. This is their first lead of the season. They'd won a couple of games, but only in overtime. So this tonight was the first time they've actually held a lead and they did a pretty good job of hanging on to that and protecting it. They blocked quite a bit of shots, and Andre Vasilevsky threw in, 2 or 3 special saves to keep the Penguins from getting any kind of momentum and energy when the game was still up for grabs. Of course, Zucker scored late, but at that point, the horse was very much out of the barn. So, what do you want to talk about tonight? I do want to discuss the fact that we've seen some players step up. And I will also say, I talked about eating crow earlier regarding the team's performance at the start of the year without their 2 stud centers. I will also say that last year I was not terribly impressed by Drew O'Connor. I thought that he was potentially an afterthought and a healthy scratch at the NHL level for at least for the foreseeable future, not to say for the rest of his career. But certainly I thought that it would be the case where he would be a spare part at the very best in the NHL. But he's been given an opportunity here, and much like a guy like Evan Rodriguez, guys who are warming to the task and playing confidently. And I think it's hard to play really confidently when you come into the lineup with players like Sidney Crosby, especially, and Evgeny Malkin and Chris Letang, and players who've won Stanley Cups, even a Jake Gensel or a Brian Rust. I'm not saying that they're intimidating intentionally, but it has to feel that way when you're a young player. It's not like coming up with the Coyotes or, pick your team, the Sabres, as I mentioned them earlier in this program. It's not like making your debut for those teams that are rebuilding and you have a lot of your peers from the AHL recently with you. When the big boys are in the lineup, you're going to defer to them naturally. That's just what happens, whether you're playing with them on their line or on their defense pairing or you're not. And with Crosby and Malkin out, guys have been forced to play for their lives in a lot of cases and play for the pride of that Penguins crest on their sweater and try to make sure there wasn't this huge drop off and show that it's not always about Crosby and Malkin. It can be about some of the supporting characters, and it can be about, as some of the analytics experts around the NHL have pointed out, there's just this Penguins effect. Guys like Radim Zahorna, for instance, has exceedingly good results in terms of shots for and against when he's on the ice compared to expectation. I already talked about Drew O'Connor. I talked about Evan Rodriguez. You're seeing Brock McGinn step in and look pretty darn competent. In fact, he was robbed of a goal tonight. There was an early whistle. More on that later that took one away from him. But you see players like that, and you've seen players in the past too. I think Brandon Tanev was a great fit, and it was no surprise he was taken by the Seattle Kraken in the expansion draft. But I was a little low on him coming in. But there is this culture, perhaps, or this structure, or just the standard. Who knows what you want to call it? But there's some of that positive momentum. There's that ability for the Penguins to play above their ability level when players are out, but also to raise the level of guys who probably didn't expect to have huge success at the NHL level, or in some cases were regarded by rival evaluators as just, as I mentioned before, spare parts, or even worse than that, replacement level or below. And the Penguins have shown off that phenomenon. I'm sure many teams and players, I know a lot of fans are frustrated across the league. Just from my cross section of my Twitter timeline, it's funny to watch some folks who I follow, who follow other teams and root for other teams, just marvel in a negative way at how the Penguins are able to do this. And I've been marveling in a positive way. And that's what I want tonight to be about. We can honestly break down some of these future games on a more granular basis. But since I haven't done a broadcast, I haven't done one of these shows this season so far, I did want to take into account the full 6-game slate that preceded this one. Like I mentioned, the Penguins now at 3-1-2. You can join the live chat here if you like. I'm also going to tweet this out one more time. This is Pittsburgh Postgame on Pittsburgh Sports Live. If you're not familiar with our channel and you're checking us out for the first time, we have plenty of content surrounding not just the Pittsburgh pro teams, but also, for instance, Pitt football is making a lot of noise, but we also cover all the Division I schools in the Pittsburgh area and their athletic teams. So you won't find a one-stop shop for online content, video content regarding the Pittsburgh area teams than Pittsburgh Sports Live. And I'm proud to be a part of it once again, even though I have moved to Grand Rapids, Michigan. God bless ESPN and ESPN Plus. I'm able to watch almost all of these games, it looks like, with just my existing ESPN Plus account, which I think is the best bargain in sports media right now. Crosby, like I mentioned, probably coming back shortly. I don't know about Thursday for sure, but you bring him back and then suddenly some guys start to fall into place more down the lineup, and it doesn't look as much like the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins on a game in and game out basis. But I've actually had a lot of fun watching this team perform, and I think it is about expectations. And we've seen this over the years. The Penguins are fortunate enough to have converted for 3 Stanley Cup wins, 3 championships. We've seen this with teams that haven't been so fortunate. And coincidence tonight that the Atlanta Braves are playing in their first World Series since 1999. The Braves had this effect. They won 15 consecutive NL East championships in the regular season. But fans, naturally, you get accustomed to it. You get spoiled, if you want to use that pejorative term. I'm not sure that I do. It's just human nature. You get used to wins and you want more and more. And a victory in the regular season just doesn't mean the same as it did before. And heck, victories in the playoffs don't mean as much as they used to anymore, even though in Pittsburgh, we haven't seen a lot of that in the last 3 years. So perhaps some of the consternation, some of the angst, anxiety, the Sturm und Drang for you German speakers out there, I think that's been justified, certainly because of the closing championship window. It may have already closed, I guess. You don't really know that until after the fact, hindsight being more accurate than foresight, of course. But it has been refreshing, is my general point. It's been refreshing to watch this team and just say, you know what, it's all gravy. If they get a regulation tie like they did against the Florida Panthers in that exciting 5-4 OT loss a couple of weeks ago, so be it. They lose the game. Oh, well, we didn't expect them to compete against a rising Panthers team that well. And they did. Same deal as opening night against Tampa. Honestly, same deal as it was when they wiped out Chicago, who I thought would be extremely motivated to come out and put it to them. And then, speaking of teams that should have been motivated, the Toronto Maple Leafs, they just went away as the Penguins ground them into submission this past Saturday, 7-1. So this is the first night that the offense really couldn't keep up. But you know what? The game against Dallas as well, there was just some sporadic offensive pressure. So I guess I shouldn't say this is the first game in which the attack didn't look as potent as we'd like to see it. But as I said, I was expecting more games like this where they score 1 goal or score 2 goals or get shut out, which hasn't happened yet. And to this point, they have outperformed all reasonable expectations. And so I'm enjoying that. I'm embracing that. And even though they're still, 4th in the Metro Division, tough division to be in, as always, it looks like, again, this season, at least in the early stretch, they're ahead of the game as far as I'm concerned. I don't care where they are in the standings. When you are able to get standings points from 5 out of 6 coming into tonight, you took 4 to OT. Like I said, you've played the defending champs quite well. In fact, tonight's game was fairly even across the board. You look at shot attempts, you look at scoring chances. The Penguins were trailing for much of this game, so they naturally are going to pile up some of those attempts and chances at the end of the game. But regardless, neither here nor there. In fact, shot attempts were dead even at 5-on-5 in this game, 40-40. I think the Lightning still aren't quite as sharp as they would certainly like to be. They're well off their peak. But the Penguins played them. They took them toe-to-toe. High danger chances were 7-7 at 5-on-5. Expected goals was about 1.5 for each team. On the power play, and actually special teams in general, the Lightning had a couple of shorthanded chances too. That's where Tampa Bay showed its skill superiority. Even though they didn't score on the power play, they were able to control some of the play there. And like I said, there were some moments for the Penguins where they weren't on top of their details as much as we've seen them in the opening 6 games. But I'm not about to complain about that. They still generated 25 scoring chances per natural stat tricks accounting, and 8 of those high danger. Tampa Bay had 10 at high danger and 32 scoring chances overall. So there you go. It was an even game against a team in Tampa that, yes, lost its entire second line this past year to free agency and the expansion draft. But at the same time, you'd expect them to be able to come in and control a game against the Penguins, whether it's here or down in Tampa, when the Penguins are without their 2 stars. And I don't know if I call Malkin a superstar anymore, but he's certainly a guy who's better than what they're throwing out there at center, at least on paper, right? And we all know that paper is quite different from actual on-ice performance. But you know what I mean. There's every reason to believe that the Penguins should be at the bottom of the Metropolitan Division, and they're not. All right, just posting one more time on Twitter here. Good to talk to all you folks again. Like I said, I made a move here with my family to Grand Rapids, Michigan, Red Wings country. I was up here when the Penguins won the Stanley Cup against the Wings in 2009, so that was pretty sweet. Wings are looking pretty interesting, but I'm very glad to be able to have that lifeline, and it increasingly doesn't matter very much where you live, right? You can keep track of your teams and this case, this time around for me living up here, I don't have to turn to an illegal stream. I can just flick on ESPN Plus. The follies of youth. My morality, I guess, was a little bit shakier back then. But hey, I was pretty broke. And maybe I'll have a little bit more in the bank these days, or at least I should at age 36 compared to 24 or 25. Okay, let's see if we have any comments. Well, 29 punts is fourth lowest in league. I think someone's in the wrong chat here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Are we talking about the Steelers? I'm not sure. Teddy Belcher, 4K ultra wide. I think that you need to switch on over to a different channel. So what's upcoming for the Penguins here after tonight's game? Calgary, New Jersey, Philly, and Minnesota as this extended homestand continues on. I'm not sure if anyone out there can help me. Do you remember a homestand this long, 8 games? That's the equivalent if you switch it over to like a baseball context. That's like playing 5 consecutive series at home, 15 straight games if you just want to extrapolate over 162. I know that hasn't happened in any of the time that I've watched baseball. I know hockey, the standards aren't quite the same as far as scheduling is concerned. I'm just wondering why in the world these are all piled up early. And I'm sure the Penguins brass are wondering that right now too, because typically it's a harder sell, not recently for the Penguins in their history, but typically it's a harder sell to get people in the building in October and November. But you have all these games front loaded. So I guess they'll have to contend with that. And then, of course, coming up later in the year, you have the Olympic break, you have the All-Star break all mixed in. So the schedule's a little bit wonky this year, but it is nice to get back to the 82 game slate and allow us to take a breath. Not every game mean life and death in the sporting context, of course. Last year was fun with the sprint to the finish, the 48 games, all in the division. I think I liked it for a one-off, but I'm happy to see a variety of teams. Happy to see Tampa Bay again. The Penguins hadn't seen them since they won their first of 2 consecutive Stanley Cups. That's kind of weird to think about, but very true. The Penguins hadn't seen the Toronto Maple Leafs. They hadn't seen the Chicago Blackhawks, the Florida Panthers. In fact, every team they've played so far, they hadn't seen since the 2019-20 season. And that'll go for Calgary. They'll finally play a divisional opponent in game number 8 against New Jersey coming up on Halloween Eve on Saturday. This is Pittsburgh Postgame on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Let's talk a little bit about this game because even though it ended up being a 4-goal spread in favor of the Lightning, it could have easily gone a couple of different ways. And that all starts in the first period. And I brought this up very early on in the show, but Sam Lafferty, maybe slightly out of control on the hit on Ryan McDonagh. I don't think it was illegal in a technical way. I don't blame McDonagh for being a little bit upset at the youngster taking a run at him. I think it's accurate to say it was taking a run. And, Sam Lafferty's trying to stay in the lineup. That's probably the only way he can do that is by making a huge, booming body check and getting the fans on their feet and, getting his teammates riled up, maybe turning some heads on the coaching staff. They know what he can bring in that regard and the energy and the speed, but he hasn't shown much else at the NHL level, to be quite honest. But as my friend Jose Banks on Twitter noted, I thought quite astutely, this is the most of an effect that Sam Lafferty's had on the ice in his NHL career. He not only took Ryan McDonagh off the ice for a couple of minutes, he also took Corey Perry off the ice, even though he's older and up there. But it was a trade I think the Penguins would make, Perry for Lafferty for 5 minutes apiece. So I just didn't like how Lafferty had to fight twice for a hit that wasn't illegal in the strict sense. Maybe one time you see a scrum immediately following that, but after that, there was no need for Perry to fight him too. It really smacked of a Lightning team desperate to generate some sort of emotion, and maybe that was the problem. Maybe Lafferty shouldn't have done that. Maybe he should have just let the Lightning lie there. Although I think that Tampa Bay, the way they came out, they were going to be pretty feisty tonight on a back-to-back situation. Even though their legs might have been feeling a little bit heavy, they were motivated. They were fully ready to come in here and try to get their first regulation win of the season, and they did, improving to 2-3-1. So perhaps they were grateful for Lafferty lighting their fuse just a little bit. One thing I noticed early on, though, detail is not quite in the Lightning's game yet. The D-zone coverage, the Penguins had plenty of opportunities. They had 2 or 3 flurries at the net, but Vasilevsky stood tall. There were a couple of key blocks, but Vasilevsky is, I still think, the best goalie in the league. I'm not sure that with Carey Price on the on players leave, I don't think there's any real debate that among active goalies, he's head and shoulders above, maybe literally some of the guys. I think Vasilevsky's 6'4" or whereabouts, plays very tall, but I'm not seeing a goalie who can combine that tall stature, keeping his shoulders high, as well as covering the bottom corners of the net as well as he can. There were a couple of opportunities tonight where I thought the Penguins were easily going to slide the puck between his pad and the post, and it just didn't happen. He was there in a flash. So he's just a superior athlete. And that's what I take away from watching Vasilevsky ever since we first saw him emerge on the scene in the 2016 playoffs and nearly took that series away from the Penguins in the East Final in 2016 when they were still sitting on the one Stanley Cup in the Crosby Malkin era. But like I said, Vasilevsky's still looking for his first regular season shutout, at least, of the Penguins. So they've gotten to him in some ways. He's not perfect, but he's about as close to perfect as NHL goalies get. First period as well, another possible turning point. Brock McGinn should have had a goal. He followed a rebound to the net. The shot went off of Vasilevsky's shoulder, dropped right in the crease. And I've said it time and time again, NHL referees are too quick to blow the whistle on pucks sitting around the net. For the one time they didn't do it, I was very grateful for it. The game at Florida, you might recall, when actually, you know what? I wasn't grateful because it happened against the Penguins, but that was the one time I felt like, oh, wow, they actually let the play go. You'll recall there were 5 or 6, I think all 6 Penguins on the ice were there in the blue paint, piled up trying to keep that puck away from Aaron Ekblad of the Panthers, who eventually scored to help fuel that Florida rally in the third period there. But that was one of the few times where referees have let things go. And I always feel like it's hard enough to score in this league. Let's give the offense the benefit of the doubt. Let's not blow things dead that quickly. And in this case, I'm not sure what the referee was looking at or how he lost sight of that puck. It jumped literally off of Vasilevsky's shoulder and landed in the crease. It was right there in full view of however many folks turned out to PPG Paints Arena tonight and however many folks like myself are watching on our devices. But should have been a goal for Brock McGinn. Instead, he was robbed of that. And not only that, he ends up getting called for the only penalty in that sequence as the Lightning took exception with him putting the puck into the net after the whistle, which you can't fault him for that. You couldn't have said that he was doing anything malicious there. He's trying to score a goal. And you can't exactly pull back in a split second when you hear just the faintest beginning of the whistle sounding. He had no reason to expect the whistle to sound there in that situation too. So again, the Lightning just trying to get themselves ginned up, and they did it successfully. Then they got to give power play after all that when McGinn went to the box. They didn't score on that one. Tampa Bay, I think, is still scoreless on the power play, surprisingly. If you watch them last playoffs, very surprisingly, they're scoreless through the first 6 games of the season. So good job by the Pens there, despite the Lightning getting some opportunities. And, well, it's a matter of time for them. And I think the Penguins are glad they're out of town, so their penalty kill can continue its early season success. Braden Point, though, scored the first goal of this game early in the second period, opening minute. Mikhail Sergachev with a breakout pass, a stretch pass, really, that found Point. And Dumoulin was taking playing the pass, as I guess you're taught to. And it looked like Tristan Jarry wasn't quite sure if Dumoulin was covering the pass. He didn't read the play very well, and Point expertly turned it over to the backhand and stashed it upstairs. So 1-0 Lightning on a good finish, but Jarry looked out of position, looked surprised, actually, that Point shot it, which I don't think he should have been, considering where Dumoulin was positioned on the back check there. But you know what? I'm going to give Jarry a bit of a pass. He's been one of the better goalies in the NHL, and Mike Sullivan has given him some run here. 5 out of the first 6 starts have gone to Jarry when, honestly, coming into the year, for me, the number one position on the goalie depth chart was a toss-up between he and Casey DeSmith. So clearly, Sullivan has elected to at least give Jarry the chance to rebound from last year's playoff disaster, and he has to this point. He's been one of their better players, no doubt about that. So Lightning get the early goal in the second period. It's their first lead of the season in regulation time, believe it or not. Both they and the Blackhawks came into this game without a lead. And the Blackhawks, well, they're a complete debacle at the moment. The Lightning haven't been that bad, but they've been mediocre. So that fun fact there, not so fun fact for the Lightning, telling the story on that. I mean, you don't have a lead at all. It's hard to even tell what type of a team you have if you're playing from behind all the time. Vasilevsky took a couple of goals away from O'Connor in the first period, Jake Gensel in the second period. He tried to deflect a pass from Marino from the point, and I thought it was going in. It was one of those classic Sid-style redirections at the side of the net where the player just opens the stick blade and lets the puck ramp off it, and Vasilevsky somehow smothered it. He not only got across, but also telescoped out toward Guentzel enough to prevent him from finding that angle and putting that puck under the crossbar. So score remained 1-0. There were a couple of flurries there, some opportunities for the Penguins, but then Andre Palat scores on a transition play, beating Jari over the glove, and Ryan McDonough powers one in a one-timer coming off a pass from behind the net. And just like that, it was 3-0. A couple of goals, what was it? Just less than a minute apart, in fact, in the second period. So not to say that the game was over at that point, but it was going to take some serious doing for the Penguins to make it back into that game and make it a game. They really didn't do it, even though they did score that late power play goal. Let me see if there's any other notes that I have for you. Kasperi Kapanen, no goals yet on the season. 2 really clean looks at the net on the power play tonight from the circle, and I thought he was going to bury one of them. He's typically a good finisher, or at least he was last year. Remember how just absolutely lethal he was off the rush last year. Terrific shooter, it looks like, at least it looked like, in his first stint in Pittsburgh. I know in Toronto, the finishing kind of came and went, so that was part of the reason why he was let go by the Maple Leafs. And now we're seeing a little regression back to the mean here early in the season. I don't want to make too much of it. I just want to note the fact that Kapanen, you're going to need some more production from him. But it strikes me that both he and Jake Guentzel, who picked up an assist tonight, be fair to him on the Zucker goal, both he and Guentzel, though, they're going to be the types of players that if they're playing with highly skilled players, they're going to produce a lot more. But if they're not, then since they're typically on the finishing end of these plays, you're going to see them, I think, underwhelm in some ways in the finishing area, in the shooting percentage area. And not to say those guys can't be good setup players, especially Guentzel. He has such a mind for the game. It's incredible. I love watching that guy play. But he's definitely less visible, right, without a Crosby or a Malkin centering him, without his buddy Brian Rust out there as well, as you would expect. But I think you're going to see more variability with players like that, just because they're not the types to dig into the corners and win puck possession. They're the kind who are going to play off of their line mates, find the open space, ideally. And in some cases, like Kapanen last year, how many times did he get loose for breakaways? I think he buried 5 out of 6 of them in an early stretch last season, making his Pittsburgh debut in impressive fashion. Not going in for either one of them quite yet. Guentzel has 1 goal, Kapanen with 0, of course, to this point. So, both of them are, I think, going to benefit more than most from the return of Crosby first to the lineup. Like I said, I think that's going to be coming up on Thursday. If I were a betting man, there are plenty of ways to bet, by the way. It's amazing how much sports betting is advertised these days. Not sure if you can bet on Sid coming back on Thursday. That could be one that would be privy to some, or could be vulnerable to some insider information and some insider trading. But I think we're going to see Sid back. And in that case, I believe Jake Guentzel will be the primary beneficiary of that, in addition to just the team in general getting that boost on the ice, but also emotionally from seeing their captain. And what will this be for Sid? Remember almost rubbing my eyes when I saw how many years Marc-Andre Fleury had been playing. I think this is Marc-Andre's 18th NHL season. So for Sid, let's see, he started in 2005. This is 2011. So this will be his 17th NHL season, every season since the lockout. So Sid coming back into the lineup, I don't care how many years he's played, he's going to give you some pop. And so I think number 59 is going to be one who will be especially happy to see him back. No one I know has a comment in our live chat. This stretch without the top players is going to help them out later in the season. Young guys getting minutes they wouldn't see. Yes, thank you for saying that, because I did want to tie that in before I signed off for tonight on Pittsburgh Postgame. At least you hope that's the case, right? You hope it instills a work ethic. I know this happened too in 2019-20, where Sid was out for a long stretch of time. You remember them playing very well without him in December and January of that year. He came back. It didn't seem like they kept up that level. And then, of course, COVID hit and the season was put on ice, pun not intended. Then they came back for the playoff, and it's tough to really judge much after that momentum was broken. And all the, I think, positives that were built during the 2019-20 season were basically pitched out the window, unfortunately, for the Penguins. So I hope the Stars, Sid and Gino and Letang still have some left in the tank, because I agree with you on that. I think that this can only be a positive. And I think Mike Sullivan, if you ask him in his heart of hearts, he's happy to see some of these players get opportunities to get some run early on and build some confidence. And I joked during the game that it looks like Evan Rodriguez is back on the first line at Boston U. He was one of the best players in Division I college hockey before coming out and getting drafted by the Buffalo Sabres. So it's in there. And of course, these guys aren't going to produce like first liners like they did in college. I don't care how good the college experience is, how good your team is. And that was a pretty good Boston U team. I think Jack Eichel was his line mate or a teammate, at least, of Rodriguez for the Terriers back several years ago. But at the same time, there's always that level. There's that level you can reach as a player. You can maximize your potential, and you can't do it without confidence, and you can't do it without repetition in the NHL. And you're seeing players like Drew O'Connor and Evan Rodriguez get more reps. Evan had plenty in Buffalo, but he's a different player today than he was then. And he has a better support system, at least you would think, in Pittsburgh than he did in Buffalo. So a lot of positives to take from this early season stretch. It's been fun to watch. It's been enjoyable. And I hope that you have enjoyed it the same way I have. I knew that I was thinking, oh, man, hockey's back already, and the Penguins are going to be without their top two guys. And it turns out more than that. In fact, due to COVID and some injuries popping up, wouldn't be the Penguins if they didn't have multiple players out of the lineup, right? But at this point of the season, I was kind of expecting to have that blah feeling, and I really don't. I've been energized from watching these Penguins, and we'll see how long that can last, and if they can continue to at least stay in a playoff position as they await the return of several of their top players. All right, thank you for watching. This has been Pittsburgh Postgame on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Hoping to do a lot more of these over the course of the Penguins season. If you recall, last year I did plenty with guests. I want to do more solo episodes like this to allow you to have a voice and talk about what you want to discuss with regard to the Penguins. This team is near the end for sure, at least of this championship window, but I don't think it is past the championship window. I still believe there could be one more year left here. I guess we'll see. How does 87 look? How does 71 look when he comes back in a couple of months? Hopefully, God willing. How does 58 look when he gets in? And how can 35 hold up in net? We saw it for the most part in the regular season last year, but as we all know, we're going to be looking forward to the playoffs too. But it's been a blessing to not have that forward thinking right now. The Penguins themselves, and I think us watching, have been forced to just focus on the present, take it game by game, follow that old cliche, and appreciate each game for what it is. And the Penguins have done quite well to this point this season. Okay, this is Matt Gajtka saying good night. Thank you so much for watching. You can follow me on social media at MATTGAJTKA. My name's right there at the bottom of the screen. Bottom left corner for you, bottom right corner for me. And you'll be seeing a lot more of me on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Thanks again to Mike Osti and Alan Saunders and Dan Kingerski for the platform, for all their support over the years. Great to be back for another season of Pittsburgh Postgame on Pittsburgh Sports Live.